In the age of technology and convenience, online platforms like Craigslist have become a go-to for buying, selling, and connecting with others. Yet, lurking beneath the surface are tales of terror that echo through the digital ether. These are the true Craigslist horror stories, where the promise of a deal or a connection turns into a nightmare beyond imagination. In the heart of a bustling city, where skyscrapers claw at the sky and neon lights paint the streets with an otherworldly glow, there lived a man named Alex. Alex was an avid collector of rare antiques and oddities, always on the lookout for his next prized possession. One day, he stumbled upon a listing on Craigslist for a vintage mirror that supposedly held a dark secret. The seller, known only as M, claimed the mirror was cursed and had brought nothing but misfortune to those who possessed it. Intrigued by the ominous description, Alex arranged to meet M at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. As Alex arrived at the desolate location, he felt a chill run down his spine. The warehouse stood like a mausoleum in the moonlight, its windows shattered and its doors hanging off their hinges. Ignoring the sense of foreboding that gnawed at his mind, Alex stepped inside, his footsteps echoing through the empty halls. "M," he called out, his voice swallowed by the darkness. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, shrouded in a cloak of blackness. It was M, their face obscured by the hood of their robe. Without a word, M led Alex deeper into the warehouse, where the vintage mirror stood against a crumbling brick wall. As Alex approached, he could feel the weight of centuries pressing down upon him, a palpable presence that seemed to emanate from the mirror itself. With trembling hands, Alex handed over the money, eager to claim his prize and unravel the mystery that surrounded it. But as he reached out to touch the mirror, M vanished into thin air, leaving Alex alone in the darkness. Panicked, Alex tried to flee, but the warehouse seemed to shift and twist around him, its corridors stretching endlessly into infinity. Desperate and disoriented, he stumbled upon a room filled with mirrors, each one reflecting a different version of himself, distorted and grotesque. Realizing he was trapped in a maze of his own making, Alex screamed for help, but his cries fell on deaf ears, and as the echoes of his voice faded into silence, he knew he was doomed to wander the halls of the warehouse for all eternity, a prisoner of the cursed mirror and the seller who had vanished without a trace. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, nestled among rows of identical houses, there stood an apartment building that bore witness to unspeakable horrors. It was here that Sarah, a young woman in search of affordable housing, found herself drawn to a listing on Craigslist for a one-bedroom apartment with a surprisingly low rent. Despite the warnings from her friends and family, Sarah couldn't resist the allure of the spacious apartment and its convenient location. Ignoring the whispers of doubt that lingered in the back of her mind, she signed the lease and moved in without hesitation. At first, everything seemed perfect. The apartment was clean and well-maintained, with sunlight streaming in through the windows and a sense of tranquility that soothed Sarah's troubled mind. But as the days turned into weeks, strange things began to happen. Sarah would wake in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps echoing through the empty halls, only to find no one there when she investigated. Objects would go missing, only to reappear in places she knew she hadn't left them. And worst of all, she began to see shadows moving in the corners of her vision, fleeting glimpses of something lurking just beyond sight. Terrified and alone, Sarah turned to the internet for answers, scouring forums and message boards for any mention of the apartment building's dark past. What she found chilled her to the bone. Decades earlier, the building had been the site of a series of gruesome murders committed by a deranged tenant who believed the walls were alive with the screams of the damned. Despite numerous attempts to exorcise the building of its malevolent presence, the spirits of the victims were said to still roam the halls, seeking vengeance on anyone who dared to disturb their eternal slumber. Faced with the horrifying truth, Sarah knew she had to escape, but the apartment seemed to have other plans, its walls closing in around her with each passing day. And as she fled into the night, pursued by the echoes of the past. She realized that some nightmares never truly end. In a sprawling metropolis where traffic jams were a fact of life and rush hours stretched on for hours, commuters were always on the lookout for shortcuts and alternate routes to escape the gridlock. It was here that Mark, a weary office worker with a penchant for adventure, stumbled upon a listing on Craigslist for a mysterious underground tunnel that promised to shave precious minutes off his daily commute. Intrigued by the prospect of bypassing the endless sea of brake lights and honking horns, Mark arranged to meet the seller at a secluded location on the outskirts of town. But as he descended into the depths of the tunnel, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, as if the tunnel itself were alive and hungry for unsuspecting prey. Ignoring his instincts, Mark pressed on, his footsteps echoing through the darkness as he ventured deeper into the unknown. That's when he saw it, a figure lurking in the shadows, its eyes gleaming with malice as it stalked its prey. Frozen with fear, Mark tried to run, but the tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, its twisting corridors leading him further into the abyss. As the figure drew closer, Mark could see that it was no ordinary person, but a monstrous creature with elongated limbs and razor-sharp claws. With nowhere left to run, he braced himself for the end, his screams echoing through the empty tunnel as the creature closed in for the kill. But just as all hope seemed lost, Mark stumbled upon a hidden exit, a narrow staircase that led up to the surface and the safety of daylight. Gasping for breath, he emerged into the blinding sunlight, his heart pounding in his chest as he realized he had narrowly escaped with his life. From that day on, Mark vowed never to trust the promises of Craigslist again, knowing that behind every listing lay a dark and dangerous secret waiting to be uncovered. As the sun sets on another day in the digital age, the true Craigslist horror stories continue to haunt the hearts and minds of those who dare to venture into the depths of the internet's darkest corners. For in the shadows lurk tales of terror beyond imagination, where the promise of a deal or a connection can turn into a nightmare beyond comprehension. So the next time you browse through the listings on Craigslist, remember to tread carefully, for you never know what horrors may be lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to ensnare the unwary in their deadly embrace.